Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue painting through our pile of shame, and I've managed to find at the bottom of my big box of minis these three lovely old Warhammer models. These are Kislev Kossars to be specific, and I decided to try and go for the old paint scheme, which is hopefully popping up on screen for you right now, and try and do my take on them. So, starting off with a grey primer. With metal models, really important to have a good prime on them, otherwise paint loves to flake off. And we're going to start by just putting on our base colours. So currently using the Fang to put in the trousers for this guy. Using an old brush here so I can be really rough with it. I'm not too bothered at this point if it spills over to other areas, because we're going to go over those later. And here you can see me being very rough with that brush indeed, so try and use an old brush. For our other two boys, I'm going to flip the scheme, so we want their jerkins to be a blue colour instead. So again, being quite rough, filling in our blue. When you're doing this, making sure that you cover all the bits of the jacket, so they often have a little bit underneath their furs, underneath their head. So just covering this. Better to overcover at this point than undercover and have areas left grey. Then we're going to move on to our second main colour, which is our red. Here I'm using corn red, filling in the trousers for our first gentleman. And again, don't worry too much if this goes onto his boots. Boots are going to be black later, so should cover it quite nicely. Also going to give all their hats the red treatment as well. For our last guy, however, I am flipping my order a little bit because he's wearing. He's very cool. He's wearing a kind of tank top vest. I'm going to do the skin first because I'm going to paint the red over that. I tend to try and pick whatever layer is lowest on the model and do that first. And while I'm here, I'm also just going to pick out things like his face while I have the pink out. Going back across the other models, going to do bits like their faces too. This time I'm using rat skin flesh. You can see I'm taking a little bit more time now. The further in we go, the more layers we do. We don't want to cover too much over a layer we've already done. And then finally for our vest man, filling in his vest in that same red colour, and not forgetting his hat as well. Okay, so now we can move on to our browns. I'm using a Doomball brown here to give us a nice brown colour to start with. And there's lots of different bits that are brown on these models, things like their bows, their quivers. Sometimes you can see arrows popping up, which we want to fill in too. And of course any axe shafts, we want them to read as wood as well. With metal models you often get this weird thing where there's spaces which I call the void. They're not really supposed to be anything on the model, but it's just a result of how metal sprues are cast, and so we're just making sure that our brown is going nice and deep in behind our wooden surfaces to cover this void area as well. If you pick up a metal mini, you'll know what I'm talking about. Finally covering other bits like bags and the belts that they're all wearing. Moving on to our black, I am using Black Legion. I like the consistency and the coverage you get with Black Legion, and with Black Legion I'm going to start by working on their boots. Again, taking a little bit more time on this one and trying not to go over that blue that we've already done, but little mistakes are fine. I also decided I want these people to have black facial hair because I thought that'd be nice and contrasting, so filling in this guy's lovely moustache with that same black. Just going to repeat that process on our other two minis as well, so making sure that we've got a good even black coverage on the boots and on the moustaches and other hair that we have on our other two models. our third man has these luscious locks of hair, and so we're going to take a little bit more time going around and picking all of these out as well. Think this will contrast quite nicely with the fur that he's wearing once we're done. And again, really take your time on this. Having a brush with a nice sharp tip will be helpful. So, moving on to the metals, mostly the axe heads. I'm using the speed paint polished silver for this. Again, I'm choosing a speed paint here because I just like the consistency and how easy it is to control. Making sure that we cover these axe heads, which are quite big, from the different angles that we might see them in, so especially remembering the top and the edges too. And there, now that's done, going to put a light brown wash all over the models. So you'll notice I'm using an old makeup brush for this, loading that up quite generously, and then just covering the model with it. Important to do is just to go back and check that too much wash isn't pooling in any one area. That might leave some unsightly brown spots, but if there's too many of those, don't worry, it can also just read as dirt. Same again for our other guy. And after this step, we can hopefully get onto the fun part of layering. Finally, before we do that, I just went for some dark black wash, which I put exclusively over the skin, just to bump our contrast a little bit. And now we're on to my favourite part, the layering. So starting with the blue, going to an Altdorf Guard blue, and starting to pick out the raised areas on this the blue cloth. So for this guy, it's his trousers, picking out any bits that will catch the light, and helping to bring that colour back up for us. For the other people, it is their jerkins, so picking out the edge around their torso, as well as things like sleeves, and any areas which are more upward facing, and which are more likely to catch the light. After that step, going back again with a Lothian Guard blue, so an even lighter blue, and going over fewer areas this time, but again just picking out the areas that are going to get most of the light, to hopefully build up a nice, bright blue. I find layering a really nice, fast and effective way to make your models look good quick. It, along with dry brushing, can help save you lots of time. There'll be a bit of that later. But let me know what you layer in the comments below. And finally on this guy, with that brightest blue, picking out the edges of those tussles, the edges of his sleeves, and any creases which are a bit more prominent. We're then going to go and do the same thing with the reds, but this time using Mephiston Red, one of my favourite reds. For both of these stages, make sure that your paint is watered down a little bit, especially with the Mephiston Red, which is a base paint, just so that we get a nice smooth transition and smooth application. So again, just going over areas which are going to be catching the light, including the top of their hats. For the second guy, doing the same thing again, starting with his trousers. And then we're going to move on to do a similar thing. Going to spend a little bit less time on this with our browns. Here I'm using Scrag Brown to build us up from that Doombell Brown we used earlier. And I'll go on stuff like upward faces of quivers, axe shafts, and bits like that. Nextly, working on the skin, going back to our rat skin colour. To bring up the skin, and especially on this guy who has great arms, and bringing out a little bit more definition to them. We also want to do the same on the face. These old models, really tricky. They've got really small faces compared to the newer stuff, so having to be really careful. And again, when we're going over the fingers, I want to be really careful here too, so that we don't fall into the recesses and ruin that nice contrast that we've built up so far. I'm then going to go back over those areas again with a mix of the rat skin flesh and a Nushabti bone. So we've got 2 layers of highlights going on the skin. And just like we did with the blue, gonna cover less and less area the lighter we go. Hopefully create a lovely gradient for us. Finally, I decided to give some of these men's mustachios a bit more definition with some Dawnstone, so that's a grey. And doing the same with this hair as well, so just picking out the really raised parts. And then just to finish off, going to do some nice quick dry brushing with some Nushabti bone to highlight any fur and the rims of their hat. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to see me working through more of my pile of shame.